Thank you. About a year ago, I discovered something pretty interesting about the independent movement. I learned that most independents are actually more excited by and interested in conversations about history than politics, which is pretty funny when you think about it. We're all trying to be politicians, but it's not a surprise because actually what we want to do is make history. What we want to do is make change. Very few people that you have drinks with are interested in this because they're interested in the horse trading or the backroom deals. I've yet to meet an independent who wants to put their hands on the levers of state or really bend a legislature at the state or federal level to their will. That's not who we are. We are not politicians. We want to be a part of this movement. Let me move this forward there. Sorry. We want to be a part of this because we genuinely believe that our country's in a bad spot. We are not happy with where we are as a country. We believe as well that we can improve the trajectory of our politics. We have faith in the system, which allows us to believe that we can actually make an imprint on history. Unfortunately, at this point, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I think this man here has it right, and anybody who watches The West Wing knows this is Toby Ziegler, the font of sort of pessimism in the political sphere, but also perhaps a dose of realism. And I agree. I think, in fact, our movement at this point has a very good chance of being forgotten by history. This is a sad fact, but I'm here to be brutally honest with you. But I don't think that's the end of the story. I actually think that we as a movement also have a tremendous opportunity before us, and that's what I'd like to talk about today. I believe actually by understanding our history and by playing the right role in our democracy, we have a tremendous potential to actually fix the broken system of government. And that's exciting. That's what keeps most of us in this movement. That's what gets us all excited to be a part of the future. And sure, we face an uphill battle. In the next few minutes, I'm going to describe why history sort of informs the incredibly long odds that minority parties face, which, let's face it, we're not even a minority party yet. But at some point, maybe we will become one. And if we do become one, we will face a very uphill battle. The reasons for that are clear, right? Partisan divisions are believed to run deep. I use the word believed for an intentional reason, which you'll understand a little bit better in a second. But also, the minor parties have a really, really spotty history if you look at and judge success on the basis of electoral victory. I suggest to you there might be a different and better way to consider our future. I also believe, though, and you'll find that I'm not a complete pessimist, I believe that the winds of history are at our back at the moment. I really believe that the citizens of this country, the people in my district and my state, are really restive. They're restive, they're frustrated, they're angry. We can use this to our advantage. And I think this is an important truth that we need to get comfortable with. They are clear that partisanship has broken our system of government. They are frustrated beyond belief. And yet, when you talk to voters, they have not given up hope. They have not abandoned their country. They're not checked out of the process. They're angry, but they're engaged. And that's a great opportunity for our movement, in my opinion. So history is watching, no doubt about it. History is always watching. But I'm starting to believe, actually, that history is actually in our corner on this one, which is pretty exciting. So before we jump in the time machine and look back in history, let's try for a second to understand the current moment, where we stand right here today, what we learn. And anyone who's campaigning at the moment, as I am, will recognize shots like this. Right? We are always spending time where the voters are. I live in a community called Highlands Ranch, and I'm in Highlands Ranch all the time. If there are a group of people there, I'm with them. I'm talking to them. And all of you are as well, because we know that in order to win, we have to talk to people. Lots and lots of people. And I've talked to about 5,000 folks in the last couple of months, and I've realized that my assumptions about politics were almost all not just wrong, they were dead wrong. Right? I assumed that hardcore partisans would oppose my campaign. I assumed that the party insiders, the organizers, the experts, the people who go to the caucus nights would fight me tooth and nail. I assumed that everybody had already picked sides. Right? I assumed that everybody was already red or blue, and my role as an independent would be to peel off a few of them with a very persuasive message. Right? I'm glad to report that is not what I'm finding when I'm talking to people at farmers markets and when I'm going to local movie nights and concerts. I'm not finding that at all. And what is more, it's not just something in the water in Highlands Ranch or something particular to me. I've had conversations with folks in this audience. They echo this exact experience. Experience shows me that the narrative, the dominant narrative, is wrong, and we can easily understand why. It's the duopoly's narrative. Everybody in the duopoly, in the system, benefits from our collective acceptance of these facts. Everybody's red, everybody's blue. That means nobody can be anything else. But when you talk to people, actual people, you find that they are actually absolutely resistant to the labels. They will tell you 6 waves from Sunday why they're not really a Democrat. Sure, they vote Democratic, or they've been a Republican for 40, but actually, and they will go on and on about the actually. The R and the D is a very, very minor slice of why they want to engage and why they're motivated not to give up on our politics. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we go forward. So in the simplest terms, what I have learned by talking to real people is the following. Number one, people realize that politics is getting worse. Right? I think that the 2 former speakers made that pretty clear. But they love their country too much to give up. Right? We are not resigned, we are not quitting, we are Americans, and we're in this because we believe our country is worth saving from the duopoly structure that has so frustrated most Americans. And then importantly, and this is something I've learned has been echoed in others' campaigns as well, they are enthused by our ideas. They hear this model, they hear this idea, and they say, hey, that sounds like, and then they start finishing my sentences. This is not something we have created in some back room where Nick Troiano and the team with a bunch of computers is deciding our fate or our future. This, as was made evident this morning by Joel Sirby, this is a movement that we are a part of, but we are not creating, not by a long shot. And anybody who interacts with voters knows that that's true. So, more recent history, in my view. Let's look a little further back first. So this is a really interesting chart. It's a snapshot of political parties from Washington to McKinley, roughly. And a closer look reveals a few very interesting facts about our history. First of all, major parties have evolved, right? Before Democrats, there were Democrat Republicans. And before Republicans, there were Whigs. And before that, there were Federalists, right? We are a 2-party structure, but the 2 parties have not been constant through our history. Number one. Number two, minor parties take many, many forms. Right? We heard a question, I think Jackie earlier in a session raised the notion that there are issue parties. Well, yeah, there are definitely issue parties. We've had a prohibition party in the past. We've had a lot of issue parties. We've also had personality parties, like when TR decided to be a bull moose and whatever that meant. And that's profound. And we've had parties that are more philosophically based. Consider the socialists or libertarians, for example. We are a country with, yes, a duopoly structure, but lots of other parties who play in the mix. And it's easy to forget that when you view everything through this lens of duopolistic analysis. Number three, the minor parties, even those that have a short life, a sort of flash in the pan effect, they actually have a tremendously profound impact on our political trajectory. Because the larger parties, the Republicans and Democrats, have to respond, and they do, and they change. These lines are straight because that's a function of PowerPoint. I couldn't make them all curvy and communicate to you effectively. But the lines go further apart or closer together based in large part on what the minor parties do, what they force into the system. And that's an important thing for us to remember as we plan for the future. So slightly more recent history, in my view, is defined by stability, as you can clearly see, right? We haven't had all the shakeups and realignments in the last 100 years or so. This view, though, makes it pretty clear to me that the minor parties influence the major parties by forcing them to evolve, as I said. And they've done so with great effect because they've learned to co-opt. And we had some conversations about that in an earlier session as well. They've learned to co-opt new ideas. And that's a healthy thing for democracy. Now, I maintain that the 2 parties have forgotten how to do that, and putting a little pressure on both of them might actually tremendously help improve our outcomes. But number 2, minor parties that make the most impact tend to form and flourish in the center, in the space between Republicans and Democrats. Right? Think of Ross Perot in '92. We got roughly 19% of the vote nationally at a popular level. And Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 got 27%. Right? So those 2 folks took ground in the middle, and they got a lot of support. And not surprisingly, after they left the political scene, things came together just a bit. So I think the other important thing that we do as a movement is recognize the importance of expectations which are understood in the context of history. So to play the right role, in my view, which is what this is all about, right? When you look at this 130, 125 years of stability, it's easy to sort of take away that this is anomalous, right? The chart prior makes it clear that stability was not a feature of our system, and yet this chart, it's all about stability, and one could easily reach the conclusion that a major realignment is long overdue, right? We had some folks earlier talking about the buckets, and if you were in the media session, and what defines a Democrat and what defines a Republican, and what's in each of those buckets changes over time. And one could reasonably expect that at some point in the near future there will be a realignment of these major parties. My view is that if there is, we'll likely be a part of its shaping. We'll likely be a part of what goes in which bucket. And hey, maybe we have a bucket too. And wouldn't it be nice to decide what goes in it based on talking to actual voters rather than political experts? I believe that that's an important part. But to play the right role, in my view, we as a movement have to be on the same page. Right? We have to absolutely know what we can deliver for voters. And then, folks, we got to get about the business of delivering it. Because at the end of the day, promises and plans wear thin very, very quickly, right? We have to not only be a movement that motivates and excites and gets people to do something different, I'm not R, I'm not D, but actually delivers when you're in the legislature. And we heard some great examples of that. I'm heartened to hear that in Maine and Alaska and all these places, those changes are beginning, sort of the green shoots are in view, but we need to continue that momentum. So not too long ago, our leaders were, in my view, fairly good at building bridges, and now they've really kind of honed their moat building skills. This is not a surprise, right? We've all heard the stories of compromise in the past between the sort of notable accomplishments. Reagan and Tip O'Neill were definitely not in the same party. But when they were coming up with a new tax code, major reform, they were on the same team, and that's critical. Thinking a little bit more recently, Bill Clinton and a much, much younger Newt Gingrich with a bowling ball-sized cell phone there, before they shut down the government, or after, I forget which it was, they actually reformed welfare, right? Compromise used to be an important feature of American life, and its demise is really depressing a lot of Americans. It's not just the people here in this room who find that a disheartening development. The people in this room are willing to act on it. But at the end of the day, everybody notices it. So the next one, this is a very quick tally of the popular vote. Democrats and Republicans over history have taken about 27%, 26% of all popular votes in American history. Minor parties, 3%. Not surprisingly, very small. The really important takeaway here, 44% of the people have sent a very clear message to the duopoly. They didn't vote. They decided to stay home. Their message is not being accounted for, is not being heard in the system, and that's important. This is a different view of that same data. Colorado's 3%, by the way. So very quickly, when I look forward, make no mistake about it, we have a very, very difficult path ahead. Only the path of partisanship has been paved by history, no doubt. But take heart. This is how things looked for Democrats in 1960. As compared to Republicans. Democrats have been paving their path for 40 years at that point. And in 1860, Republicans had a very uphill battle under impossibly difficult political conditions. Our situation, to me, is very similar, very analogous. So the reason we find such overwhelming support when we talk to actual people is simple. From actual people, it's no mystery to me why we have found this support, why they're embracing our movement. At the end of the day, Americans feel like our political system is stuck in a rut. They're very frustrated. They believe that the system of government has failed them utterly, which it has, and they're sick of the discord. They're not proud of our leaders. For better or worse, guys, it's from this dissatisfaction that we as a movement derive our strength. We need to be honest about that. But if we don't use that negative energy and convert it into actual political measurable results, we don't have a chance of making the books. But if we do, right, then we can really transform the trajectory. We can make a big impact. So if we do these things, our movement will certainly have succeeded, and it will be remembered by history, in my view. So on behalf of a grateful nation, I thank all of you for your wisdom, your dedication, and your courage in this movement. And good luck in November, because in my view, your country needs you. Thanks.